Anyways, this kind of brings us to the end of the resume section. It's time to discuss cover letters. Whereas resumes are concise statements and measurable facts, cover letters are a chance to put your admirable personal characteristics on display with the larger purpose of driving the person reading the cover letter into your resume. There's a lot of latitude when it comes to cover letters, but here's my recommendations. Cover letters need to be brief. Again, you got a minimal exposure time and it needs to blow up. Maybe 3 or 4 short paragraphs max. Last thing an employer wants to do is read some long, boring letter. The first paragraph should include a brief introduction, a restatement of the objective, and the mandatory phrase, "as you can see in my resume," or equivalent. This is important. The cover letter needs to treat the reader like a goat herder would an ill-disciplined goat, at all times poking, prodding, and driving them to put the damn cover letter down and look at the resume. Ideally, the reader is going to put the cover letter and resume side by side, and their eyeballs will ping-pong back and forth between them. In a perfect world, you'll be able to structure the cover letter such that it points the reader to education, brings him back, then points him to work experience, brings him back, then to instrumentation equipment, brings him back, and so on, such when they get to the last paragraph, which says, "If you wish to discuss my application for this position in person, I can be reached at Selly or email at your convenience." They will have read the cover letter and resume in their entirety and send you an email. In between these gentle redirections, you should include statements about your admirable personal characteristics, highlighting your dependability, timeliness, attention to detail, and the like. You may wish to give examples about hands-on lab experiences during your program of study, and importantly, tell them you are good at something, especially enjoy doing a particular task, or have a deep understanding of a particular topic that maybe other people don't. Now, don't be cocky, and importantly, don't lie, but try to make yourself unique and desirable. I guess the same thing could be said for dating, which if you think about it, it kind of is. Resumes and cover letters put on display your admirable personal characteristics, employment history, and professional skills with the intention of attracting interest. Once you've got their attention, keep their attention by delivering more and more of what they want. All right, I don't know how you did it, but you did it. You got a call back and it's time for an interview. Hold on, let me back up. Remember that selling number and email you put in the contact information in your resume? Answer the phone and check your email. This way you know the moment you get the call and can respond appropriately. Also, if you're still enrolled in program instruction, let your instructor know you're waiting on a call. With enough advance notice, most of the time your instructor can excuse you from a class if you need to set up or attend an interview. After all, that's what you're in school for, right? To get a job. Before we discuss interview preparation, let's discuss interview format. Chances are your interview will take one of 3 forms: a phone interview, a one-on-one face-to-face interview, or a face-to-face panel interview. Nowadays, I guess you could throw a Zoom interview in there too, which is a mix of phone and face-to-face with all the bad, none of the good, and a significant chance of connectivity issues. Phone interviews. Phone interviews are super hard because you can't read and respond to the interviewer's body language and interpersonal cues, nor can the interviewer read and respond to yours. Seriously, one of the hardest interviews I ever had was a phone interview with one question: "Tell me about yourself." And the interviewer went dead quiet. I essentially did a live spoken word performance of my cover letter and resume to a dead phone line, hoping I'd hit on something they were interested in, or at the very least engage. After 15 minutes of essentially silence on the other line, I wrapped it up and the interview said, "All right, thank you," and hung up. Turns out that was an initial screening call for a later second face-to-face interview with a panel. Hopefully not every phone interview you have will be as weird as that one, but really that's what a lot of phone interviews are. Initial screening calls to make sure you're really worthy of scheduling a second face-to-face interview. More often than not, this initial screening call will not be conducted by a site supervisor or direct manager, but rather some human resources drone, especially if you're dealing with a larger Borg-like superorganization. GE, I'm looking at you. Most likely the HR drone is going to ask some very general questions like, in what way are you qualified for this position? Are you willing and able to travel? What are you looking for in this position? What are your salary expectations? Why are you leaving your current employer? If you're a fresh grad, this should be an easy answer. If offered a position, how soon would you be able to start? And after you answer these questions to their satisfaction, they'll ask, do you have any questions? First question you should ask is, can I expect a call to arrange a face-to-face interview with the site supervisor? Ideally, your impetuousness will be rewarded with another call or email setting up a face-to-face or Zoom interview. Interviews might be conducted one-on-one or with a panel. Oftentimes, the one-on-one interview will be your direct supervisor if awarded the job, whereas a panel interview might also include this person's direct supervisor as well as potential coworkers. Additionally, a panel interview might include other non-technical staff like HR. Interviews will be conducted as you might expect. Introductions, questions to you, questions to them, and closing statements. This doesn't mean you can't settle the direct and interview where you want it to go. More on this in a moment after we discuss interview preparation. The first piece of advice I can give to you about face-to-face interviews, and for that matter, life, is this. Don't be weird. If there's one thing in common about former students that failed to obtain meaningful employment, is that they were all weird. They might have been 36th level elves with a charmed Longstaff in whatever computer game they played in their mom's basement all night, but in the real world they were weird and didn't interact well with other humans. Keep in mind, weirdness is not limited to the inability to differentiate fantasy from reality, but weirdness could also take the form of a volatile, argumentative nature, extreme political or religious views that you just won't shut up about, or a refusal to wear shoes in public places. Seriously, every day I had to kick a student out of hydraulics lab and tell him to go home and get some shoes. Guess what happened next week? No shoes. Guess what happened when he graduated? No job. No one wants to be responsible for a weird employee or work with a weird coworker, even if that weirdo is a very talented electromechanical technician. That's the point of including potential coworkers on the panel interview. The first question the direct supervisor is going to ask your future coworkers after the interview wraps up is this: do you want to work for this weirdo or not? When you get right down to it, an interview isn't so much of a quiz about your technical understanding, but rather a personality test. If you can approach the interview in this fashion and not stress out about it, chances are it'll go pretty good. Now keep in mind, this personality test goes both ways. If you walk into a panel interview and you don't get a good feel about the group's safety, behavior, and organization, you might consider working somewhere else. Related to this topic, a word to the ladies. Don't worry, you got this. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. The technical world is still disproportionately populated by men, and sometimes outdated modes of thought persist. But larger, more reputable employers are starting to realize that some young men are so wrapped up in their stupid video games they can't interact with real humans anymore. This is your opportunity. Take it. A word to the guys. Get off the couch, turn off the Xbox, go on a run and do some push-ups. You embarrass me. If this doesn't apply to you, disregard. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, interview preparation. Dress the part. I know some folks may recommend you wear a suit, but I don't, because technicians don't wear suits. Technicians wear clean work pants, clean closed-toed shoes or safety boots, and clean work shirts. At a minimum, have a knife or multi-tool in your pocket. Seriously, I feel sorry for the toolless dweebs who walk around this earth incapable of opening a cardboard box, let alone fixing something. If you have a DMM, bring it with you and be prepared to show you know how to use it. Have extra copies of your resume, have your master resume, have your references, have a picture book. Some of you might be like, all right, why do you want me to bring all that stuff for? It's not like they're going to put me to work on the first day, are they? Here's the deal. I want you to bring all that stuff to the interview because I want them to ask you about it. This goes back to subtly directing the interview where you want it to go. If you walk in with a DMM in your hand, they're not going to ask you some lame question like, tell me about your greatest strengths and weaknesses. They're going to ask you about the DMM. When you're done showing them DMM tricks, they're going to ask you what's in the picture album. Credit where credit is due. The picture album is not my idea, but rather one of my former students, Reynold. Reynold is a Pisces. He likes holding hands, long walks on the beach, and ladder logic. Reynold is a super badass technician and all-around good guy. He entered our program with a strong mechanical background, and over the summer he rebuilt a wreck into a super slick classic truck. During the rebuild, he took pictures of his work from beginning to end. When a panel interview asked him to give an example of a project he worked on, he opened up the picture album and said, I think this will suffice, and spent the rest of the interview talking about what he wanted to talk about, which is restoring classic trucks. Needless to say, he was quickly hired and has done very well for himself as an electromechanical technician. Now, you might not be smooth, talented, or as handsome as Reynold, but you do have a cell phone in your pocket, right? And that phone has a camera on it. If you're enrolled in a reputable program of study, you should have at least 2 hands-on labs a week. Here's the deal. Take a picture of each of your labs and maybe print off a couple schematics and ladder logic diagrams for a couple of the motor control circuits you built. Assemble the pictures, schematics, and ladder logic diagrams in an album or a folder and be prepared to talk intelligently about them. Show the ladder logic diagram for and a picture of an assembled 2-wire circuit. Do the same for a 3-wire circuit. Compare and contrast 2 and 3-wire circuits. Talk about contactors and overloads. Show a picture of a PLC you commissioned. Compare and contrast hardwire relay-based ladder logic with the programmed instructions inside a PLC. The point is, make the interview about what you want to talk about. This does not mean you take absolute control of the interview, but rather you make the interviewers interested in what are coincidentally your favorite subjects. Interview preparation also means you have ready answers for common questions. Have an example of a project you worked on and be prepared to discuss a troubleshooting experience because they are undoubtedly going to ask about project management and troubleshooting. Keep in mind your example project doesn't necessarily need to be technical in nature, but could be any long-term undertaking that necessitated planning, coordination, and management. I was asked this question in an interview once and immediately started talking about some technical project. A couple sentences in, I saw some non-technical members of the panel start to tune out. And I said, wait, here's a better example you might all relate to. I demolished and renovated a kitchen from top to bottom, electrical, plumbing, flooring, cabinets, you named it. Everyone took notice because it was something they all related to and helped establish connection. Regarding troubleshooting, have both mechanical and electrical examples. If you're enrolled in a reputable program of study with hands-on lab experiences, by now you've had plenty of opportunities to screw things up and get them working again. Be prepared to talk about these experiences and the logic that led you one way or the other. Think back to the basic properties of series circuits. Current through elements in series is the same. If there is an open anywhere in that path, all current stops. This is something you learn in week 5 of DC circuit analysis? And hear me now. A broken or missed connection is the root cause for 99% of the problems you will ever encounter in the field. The remaining 1% being a mix of incorrect settings, software problems, or both. The actual resolution of the problem isn't what the interviewer is necessarily looking for, but rather the thought process that guided you to the solution. Fundamental series circuit properties demonstrate an open anywhere in a series path stops current flow. You should be able to relate basic electrical theory to some observed problem. For mixed electromechanical systems, of utmost importance is your ability to quickly recognize in which realm the problem lies. For example, consider an electrically controlled hydraulic system where pressure influences force, flow rate influences speed, and valve position influences direction. Hydraulics serves as the primary power doing the actual lifting and lowering, whereas electrical serves as pilot control to determine the sequence and direction. If a cylinder is extending, but extending with insufficient strength, the problem is not the electrical pilot system, and the problem lies entirely within the hydraulic realm. Perhaps the pressure relief valve is set too low. The problem is, don't troubleshoot something that's clearly not causing the problem. You should be able to talk intelligently about some of your lab troubleshooting experiences and how you resolve them. Again, very rarely are interviews technical quizzes, and most questions will be focused about your personality and professionalism. The fact that you are enrolled in a reputable program of study is often proof enough of your technical knowledge. This being said, expect a couple technical softballs to be lobbed your way. It is your responsibility to knock these easy pitches out of the park, especially if you're one of my students. I expect and will tolerate nothing but the best from you, so don't screw this up. Be ready though, because sometimes these easy technical questions have more complicated follow-ups that might trip you up if you're not prepared. Here's a couple examples of low-level technical questions with tricky follow-ups. These are real questions that some of my students were asked during interviews, so pay attention. What's the difference between grease and oil? Grease is a soft solid, oil is a liquid. Grease has a tendency to be used on slower-moving mechanical linkages, whereas oil has a tendency to be used on faster-moving mechanical linkages. Next question. Follow up. You're working with a coworker and neither of you know the proper lubricant to use for a particular application, and your coworker suggests that you just coat the part in a bunch of oil and move on. How do you respond? Stop work. Research the application and determine the proper type and amount of lubricant. Next question. See how the initial question went from technical to procedural? Expect this. Have a response for the technical and procedural aspects. You don't even need to know the procedure because it will often be written out. The fact is you're willing to follow an established procedure each and every time and not go cowboy. The answer to every single question is follow the established procedure and work within the chain of command. Keep in mind though, in the interview is largely a personality test. Try this sample interview question on for size. Question. You and a coworker are working at heights, and the coworker refuses to wear the protective harness and fall arrest system. What are you going to do? A. Follow their example and not use your PPE. B. Ignore your coworker and continue to use your PPE. C. Call your manager and let them know your coworker won't use their PPE. The answer is none of the above. Again, the interview is a personality test. Yes, you should elevate items of concern up the established chain of command, but you also need to work as a team. Part of being on a team is to politely tell your team members to get their head in the game. A good response to the safety question might be, I would politely ask my coworker to use their PPE. The interviewer might push back. Let's say the coworker still refuses to use their PPE. Now is the appropriate time to elevate this up the established chain of command and tell your boss about your coworker's refusal to wear their PPE. The interviewer might push back again. Let's say this person refusing to wear their PPE is your boss. What are you going to do now? The answer is, ask them to wear it, and if they don't wear it, go to their boss. You dig? Work as a team, follow established procedures, operate within the chain of command. Now, I'm not going to go through all the possible interview questions that can and will be asked, but if you can remember these simple rules every time you craft a response for a question, you will ace that interview. Have a basic understanding of technology and be able to communicate technical terms to non-technical people. Follow established procedures, work within the chain of command, be a good team member. Another piece of advice I can give about interviews is this. Read the room and know what the job entails. True story. One of my former students was interviewing for a traveling retrofit position for a wind turbine service organization. A traveling retrofit team, as the name implies, travels from place to place, taking off an old part with frequent failure rates and reinstalling, i.e. retrofitting, a redesigned part that hopefully won't fail as frequently. Long story short, get to a site, do a job, go to a different site, do the same job. The interview was going pretty well, and it was just about to wrap up when the team lead asked my student, how do you feel about performing the same task repeatedly? And my student said, oh, that would drive me crazy. Interview over. Performing the same job over and over was the job. The point is, know what you're getting into and don't apply for jobs you don't like. I guess it worked out for this guy in the end, though, because they actually found him a different position he enjoyed and excelled at. All right, let's wrap up this section with a discussion on pay. Now I know you're a dependable person with some valuable technical skills, but I need to warn you that you'll most likely not land a high-paying gig straight out of school, and you probably should temper your expectations. The machinery of capitalism is indeed oiled with the blood of the workers, and there's always someone more desperate than you that'll do the same work cheaper. How desperate are you? You should have at least a general idea of compensation well in advance of the interview. Since cost of living varies wildly across the United States and due to inevitable financial fluctuations, any figure I present here for average technician wage is immediately suspect. Do your research for comparable positions in your area and keep in touch with former classmates. You got to start somewhere, but the place you start might not be where you want to stay forever. There's probably not a lot of room for negotiation for starting pay, but more opportunities will open up with more experience. Stay flexible. If money is indeed your primary concern right out of the gates, a number of former students have taken admittedly less glamorous, more demanding, yet highly lucrative travel jobs upon graduation. If you're young and you don't have a baby or a baby mama or a baby daddy you need to take care of, you need to snap jobs like this up. Build experience, save money, and with a year or two of experience, you'll be better positioned financially and professionally to make choices about your career. Speaking of money, save money. At a minimum, you need to be tithing 10% of your take-home pay to you and maxing out any employee-sponsored savings plans. And you have to be self-disciplined not to touch it. Eventually, you're going to want to purchase a house, and housing prices are only going up. As I mentioned earlier, a number of my students have taken high-paying travel jobs right out of school, and half of them follow my advice about saving money, and half of them don't. They see their first paycheck go crazy and buy themselves a Camaro, a snowmobile, a jet ski, and a tricked-out AR-15. Far be it from me to tell you how to spend your money, perhaps a sensible pickup truck and a quality bolt-action 308, or a Mossberg 535 and Mossy Oak breakup Infinity with interchangeable field turkey and rifle barrels might be more efficient use of your pay. This being said, you got to get the job, and all this advice about saving money is pointless if you don't get the job. One of the most successful post-interview techniques I can recommend is this. Send a thank you letter. Thank the interviewers for their time and use this extra opportunity to remind them about your interest in and qualification for the position, and potentially clarify any misstatements you made in the interview. Those graduates that send thank you letters have significantly more success in landing better jobs than those that don't. All right, we're just about to wrap this up, and some of you might be wondering why I haven't discussed online job boards or recommended a particular job search site. I'm hesitant to do so for the same reason I'm hesitant to specify an average technician wage. Most likely, any recommendation I give today will be immediately invalidated tomorrow. This being said, a lot of people seem to be having success with LinkedIn. One solid recommendation I will give you, however, is this: usajobs.gov. When you are done with this lecture and your resume, I need you to go to usajobs.gov and fill out a profile. Do it. It's a lot of work and takes a lot of time, but trust me, it's worth it. Entering a profile is simply putting elements of your resume in the correct boxes. If you got a good resume, all you got to do is put it in the right entries in the right spots. There are a number of rewarding technical careers in federal organizations like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Bonneville Power Administration, and they're only available for people that have filled out their usajobs.gov profile. Additionally, with an active profile, this site also searches for positions which you are qualified for that might have escaped your notice. Lastly, I should mention that some large Borg-like superorganizations like GE and Siemens have a similar feature whereby you must enter your resume into their specific career database. All right, that's all I got for you today. Again, consider everything I discussed in this lecture as a recommendation to be used or discarded as you see fit. This being said, the resume and cover letter layouts and interview techniques and strategies as presented in this lecture have helped a number of former students land great jobs that have led to rewarding careers. Feel free to let other viewers know how it's going out there in the comment section below, if you've got any additional job hunting advice you're willing to share. In conclusion, this lecture discussed resumes, cover letters, and interviews, necessary elements to obtaining a job. We discussed how to effectively organize a resume and how a cover letter should drive a reader into your resume. Additionally, we examined common interview scenarios and how to prepare in advance for the most predictable among them. Lastly, we discussed the importance of sending a thank you letter after the interview and briefly discussed job-specific profiles and databases. Remember to review these concepts as often as you need to really drive it home. Imagine how well lab will go if you know what you're doing. Thank you very much for your attention and interest, and we'll see you again during the next lecture of our series. Remember to tell your Lazy Lab partner about this resource, and be sure to check out the Big Bad Tech channel for additional resources and updates.